To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, and we are just in time to get you going for the weekend of gardening. It is that time of year, and we're going to talk about containers today. Containers are a beautiful thing. For me, they can be a terrible thing, but one thing we know is we need to avoid certain mistakes with containers. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to run through those, and this will kind of get you going in the right direction. You know, hopefully if you're just getting started or whatever, it'll kind of push you into the right way, or maybe you're a year or two into containers, and some of the problems can creep up in time. But I know Batavia is here. I have my lovely co-host, Miss Batavia, is here, and she's a huge container gardener. She's probably got maybe 500 containers in her yard. How do you manage all that?
Yeah, I've downsized a bit. Yeah, I'm just at 500 this year.
Joking, everybody. That's a throwback to the original episodes.
Yeah. Did I tell you how much I love the show Monk?
I hate that show.
Oh, I love it, and I have a tendency. Like, white noise for me sometimes is a television show that it's like very predictable. Yeah. And or a television show that I've seen before. So I recently finished, kind of coming out of the winter, a rewatch of Monk. And so when you open up about containers, all I can think of, it's a gift and a curse, you know, which is one of his common lines. And, you know, that can be the case in the gardening world for containers. And I'm trying to work my way out of the version of Batavia that's so concerned about you as a gardener that I give you a dozen buts, you know, but remember this or remember that, you know. I do think containers are a great entryway into gardening for people. And I do also think that there are opportunities for disappointment. And that's a part of what we're going to discuss today. You know, how do you avoid these mistakes? So there is absolutely a primary use of garden beds in my garden, but there's definitely supplemental growing happening in containers. Yeah. And I think that that's a way. It doesn't have to be exclusively one way or another. I think you figure out what works for you, what you like to grow in one medium versus another.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, originally we got a question on our Facebook group, Backyard Gardens Community Garden, that somebody wanted to know about amending containers. Mm-hmm. And then that kind of set us off on this path where we will probably end up diving a little bit more in depth in certain things about containers. But, you know, so that was a question of the day. I don't know how many episodes ago it was. It's a good treasure hunt for everybody. But so that being said, we have a new email address for questions of the day. It's called bygquestion@gmail.com. So you can email us if you want. It'll be easier for us to keep track of them because sometimes what happens is they get lost. So do that. And also there's a link below for seeds and also to become a subscriber. So all that stuff, if you want to help support the show, get yourself some seeds, do all that stuff. And don't forget, you can use the code 1million, spelled any way you want, with numbers, whatever, no spaces, and it gets you 10% off and a free packet of seeds with every order, all direct sowable for this season. So that being said, what were we were previously talking, and you said something about there's a few things that kind of set you up in your containers. What were they?
I think the big considerations are the type of soil you use, 1. 2, I think it's how you fertilize what you plant in those containers. 3, I think it's your watering regimen.
Right. And then I want to add one, and that would be the space for it.
Yeah, So we talked about this, and I could have just pretended like I had 4, but I want to give you your credit, and I want to acknowledge, like, I can't believe I forgot that bit, but that's hugely important, you know. And so my joke earlier was like, you can't get apple pies out of a 5-gallon apple tree, planted apple tree, and Ben does a Batavia, and he's like, but you may be able to get 1 apple, an apple turnover maybe, but no, like containers that for growing purposes have different sizes for a reason. I probably see people more often planting something that could use more space in a small container versus the reverse.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
you almost never see a single radish in a 30-gallon container, you know?
No. Well, and so since we're talking about it, let's start with spacing and then work our way down. Because that's basically square one. You know, you've decided to get a pot and you're going to put a plant in it. And now you can get anything to grow in any size pot. There's plenty of proof out there for it. It's just how productive is it going to be? I really like the word productive. I'm feeling that word productive. So, you know, in my garden, I have 6 20-plus gallon containers. I'm not sure exactly how many it is. I'm sure it's more than 20, but that's what I run in my garden. And in a serious note, what container, like what is the number of containers, if it has to be rough, fine, and then sizes roughly?
Yeah, I did a few years ago about 60 containers of various sizes, smallest being about 3 gallons, largest being about 20. That became almost overwhelming. So I scaled back. So current count is probably closer to about 30 containers. And sizing is more like at the smallest about 4 gallons. And again, the top range is 20 gallons.
Yeah.
And to be quite frank, it's difficult for me to move around anything larger than 20 gallons. Like once you get that soil in, if you get that soil and it's wet, I just physically have troubles with, you know, moving those things around. Even if I have my little cart, 20 gallons is a little bit of a stretch for me. Now, I don't move every container around every year to know, but yeah.
So your comment about you moving a 20-gallon pot made me paranoid. So either I'm super, super weak and you're really, really strong, or I am underestimating the size of my pots. So I'm gonna pull it up and look, because I'm like, she's not moving my containers. There's no way.
My grow bags, which I know are 20 gallons, and so I'm filling them up, not quite to the brim, but for those, like before I plant them, I'm like, I think I have a short. Yeah, I do. I have a short on YouTube and a reel on Instagram where I am moving a planted 20-gallon container as a grow bag, and they have the little handles. And I was cute too, honey. Let me tell you that. So, you know, I was coming in from an event or something. I was out with some friends or something. So I'm like moving it only because it started to ripen the fruit, and I didn't want the squirrels to get to it. And it was a hustle, right? You know, I was kind of like, I know you don't watch a lot of TV, but it's that old episode of Friends where, you know, Ross and Chandler are moving the sofa and Ross is yelling, pivot, like that. You could put that soundtrack, you know, to me trying to move it. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not fine. Oh, here's the post I saw. Let me see.
I'm not putting that thing over my head or anything, but.
Oh, well, I mean, I went to go move mine and I had to borrow a dolly and have 2 people help me get it on there. So clearly I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. A number 25 pot is what I use.
Okay.
I don't know what that is in gallons. I'm scrolling and I'm not seeing it, but it's the biggest pot you can get.
Like
I found a bunch
nursery?
of them on the side of the road. But it definitely does not tell me. Anyways, they're big and they're extremely heavy. So, you know, once I put them in, that's basically the end of the story. So that's what I use. But as far as space goes, wow, we got off the subject easy there.
Because he's fighting the urge, like, you're not going to challenge me to a lifting contest of pots.
Yeah.
Get it out of your mind.
Yeah, I'm going to go out there and just be like, all right, let's do this. Batavia, you grab yours, I'll grab mine. But, you know, like last year, I think I had maybe 10 pots or so. And I had put some peppers in maybe 1 or 2 gallon pots. And, man, they struggled. Now, there's a couple reasons why. One of them was simply because there's just not enough room for the roots. So the roots need to spread. This is something that I'm learning about now more so, is the amount of root space needed for plants. Like foliage, fine, whatever, you can visually see it. But then you start getting into root space, and I'm starting to see that that's not really working out the way I wanted. And that was just one of the lessons that I learned last year. And the other one was just keeping it watered. It was really difficult.
Yeah.
So I had a neighbor come over to me the other day, and he's starting a garden. He's got he went and bought, I don't know what I haven't even looked at it yet, but it's like a 10-foot by 2-foot bed of some sort. And wants to buy some tomatoes, but he's going to put them in pots outside of the beds, and which is fine. That's very good. I mean, I usually grow tomatoes in my pots. And I asked him what size they were, and he showed me, and they were probably maybe 2 to 3 gallon pots at that. And I was like, man, really and truly, you need to think about it, because, my whole thing is I don't care what you do in your garden. It's your garden. It's your space. You do it the way you want. But when it comes down to it, like, you're not going to get the results that you want out of it, because that plant just won't have enough room to grow.
Yeah, I so cover off on spacing and teetering into watering. If you've gardened in raised beds or in ground, a good indicator, and let's say you have a successful plant, something that you feel like produce what it should be producing. Whenever you pull that plant up, make a mental note of how big those roots are. So sometimes I'm surprised by how little space it seems that tomato plants take. I think things like sunflowers and okra have huge root systems. Anytime I've ever pulled them up out of a bed. The largest things I've ever tried to grow in containers are okra and tomato plants. And I think a bit of that is the gardener. I've just not had wonderful success with either. Right. Generally the plant for tomatoes look really, really, really good, but I've never had tomato plants in containers produce more tomatoes than any of my raised bed tomato plants.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think a part of what we're talking about today influences that, and is a big influence on why I haven't had that production. Right. So I think there's something to be said about that. Just as hey, surprise, favorite thing, peppers kick butt in my garden in containers.
Yep.
The smallest container I plant peppers in is 4 gallons.
Yep.
The largest I've planted peppers in is 10. I think anywhere in between is just fine. I almost always put a single pepper plant in a container. We really have the urge to double up, triple up, quadruple up in some things. Some things they work. Like I put a bunch of, contender beans, in a container, but a 4-gallon container, single pepper plant of any variety.
Yeah. And I mean, it's better to have too much space and too little. If you talk about potted plants, typically that's not the case. But in the summertime, growing these things, it does help because the demand's not on the container for the moisture. As you fill it, as the roots fill out, it's just like if you're starting seeds and you're noticing like every day I got to water, it's wilting every day. Well, what you're seeing is it's using up there's not enough space, and it's using all of the moisture in there. So it's just keep that in mind as you move forward. And the last thing I want to say about space or the size of the pot is not all plants need big giant pots. Like you brought up radishes, for instance. Now I grew radishes in one of my big pots. I put like 20 radishes in there, and I got huge radishes out of it. Man, look, I know that it was ridiculous to put radishes in those pots. I'm completely aware of that, but it worked out for me. It was fine. It wasn't a big deal, but there was just a lot of unused space within that pot. So, don't think that everything needs to go in a giant pot. I think if you're dedicated for watering, I think 5 gallons is the minimum, which clearly you've said 4. So, but 5-gallon bucket, I try not to use buckets. Try to graduate from buckets. It just looks better. Okay. I hate the 5-gallon bucket look, but just keep going around that. And once you get 5 gallons, you can graduate a little bit and you'll find your sweet spot. The good thing is you can get a lot of these pots almost free. Like I said, I got all my pots off the side of the road. Somebody had planted a bunch of stuff. I drove by, and I mean, my truck was going sideways. I was jamming on the brakes so hard. My son, I was like, get those pots. And he's like, yeah, Daddy, we got gold. Throwing them in the back. So
you could scan Be Better Garden on Instagram or Facebook, because this is where I counter your comments. And I have buckets that it's kind of like mulch, my wood chip mulch. It's free, and it's really hard for me to turn it down. Yeah. So I get those buckets from the grocery stores, and they are not aesthetically pleasing. And I put them along my fence line, right? So they're kind of tucked away. Now, and the reason why I mentioned 4 is sometimes the bakery gives me the 4-gallon bucket that had icing in it versus a 5, right? I'm like, okay, it's fine. And so had they not been free, I wouldn't buy buckets. I personally wouldn't. Yeah. I think also one of the benefits is it's just plainly put my weather. So I speak about this here and there. We don't get consistent 100-degree temperatures, right? So that's hard on containers, period. And even 5-gallon containers, not those things not drying out. I look at the containers really of any size, and you say, all right, where is it? What's the size? And what do you have planted across the season? So a lot of us are gardening and planting things for more than one season as well. So consider that too.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as like moisture levels go inside of the pot, it's one of those things too. Like, I think the reason why, and I'm just going to say it out loud, that tomatoes don't produce as much is I think it's almost impossible to water enough in the heat of summer. But you also need to make sure, like, okay, so this is where it gets kind of weird for me, is like you want to water a lot, but you also don't want it waterlogged. Mm-hmm. So how do you manage that? And the first thing is make sure you've got a drainage hole. So if you go to get buckets, make sure you're drilling a hole in the bucket or a number of holes in the bucket. Just to, you get a couple days of rain, that thing will be swimming. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to tip over a pot that didn't have anything. It's hard to get the water out of there. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, as far as my garden goes, I run a drip system in my garden. And I'm watering, it looks like every 3 days I water my main garden for, hour and a half every 3 days. I have to water the pots every day to every other day. It's just constant water. So I do that as well.
Yeah, I think, are you on water for number 3 on our list?
No, it's number 2. We did space, then water.
Oh, okay. So I gave the list in the order, and then you decided to
I think I changed it.
Things. Okay.
I didn't mean to.
So number 2, water. So the amount of water initially, like when you first plant out, and then as the seasons change, that's what I point back to. Some of the plants that I've had that struggle, I believe firmly. I mean, I know what a dry plant feels like. I have house plants. I know what that's like. Yeah. I test my containers the same way I test as far as do they need watering. My regular raised beds, put my finger in there about knuckle deep to see what the moisture's like. I also mulch my containers as a note. So I've been using more recently in the last couple of years shredded leaves. So I absolutely add that to the tops of all of my containers. And it's not just watering. Like you have to give yourself some time to figure out what makes sense.
Right.
Like, how often and the frequency. Some of y'all know I hand water still all of my garden. The occasional sprinkler will run, but I hand water those containers as well. And it's easy to kind of water and keep on moving. Some people use the rule of thumb is wait till the water runs out, and then you've thoroughly watered it, which is actually going to connect to the new number 3. Who's keeping track? But yeah, it's probably going to be the number 1 killer to plants in containers is not watering enough.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's tough too, because in the beginning of the season, you stick a small plant in You don't have to water it much. But then as it grows, again, it fills up. You need to water more. So, everything that we're going to talk about is going to be linked together here.
Yeah.
So more so than a regular garden. That's the thing about a container is it's very tight knit. Each thing affects each other. So as we go through and we talk about watering, one of the main benefits I think about a container is you have the ability to amend a container at a micro level. So, as we get into the soil aspect of it and stuff like that, I can add an amendment to the soil for the garden, for the container, to be more retentive of the soil, of the water, sorry, not the soil. Very important that we understand that we're talking about retaining water, not soil. So, I could put some peat moss in. You could get a water retentive soil to put in there in itself, and you can do each one different. I mean, you can almost treat each container like its own separate garden.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And generally speaking, the soil makeup is the same for me. But there's some things where I may amend a little bit different. So I look at the watering piece, and I feel like if you're in year one of your container gardening, it'll take you a few years if you're growing like the same things in the same containers year over year, it'll take you a few years to really feel like you've got your groove with it. Especially if you're in one of the hotter places. So again, if you're reaching the top temperatures, it's going to take you some time. I think one of the things I've observed about myself in containers is outside of peppers, I probably am changing up what I'm growing in containers each year. And that kind of takes away from the mastering of it,
Yeah, I could see that. I kind of stick with the same things within a container. I mean, this was the first year I put radishes in there. Figured why not? But other than that, I kind of stick with the same because I just have things that I like that produce out of a container. When it comes to the soil and amending and watering and all that stuff, this is where those go hand in hand together because as you water, you're going to lose soil. So it's like you fill it up to the tippy top, you grow in it, and the next thing you know, you've lost, a quarter of the soil by the end of the year. Where did it go?
I think it's compressed primarily.
Well, it's compressed.
There's some soil that's coming out of your drainage holes. Yeah.
Yep. There's some coming out, and then it's also decomposing. So, just like Batavia said, which I love that you use mulch in your containers, because I don't see a lot of people put mulch in containers. That's something that I practice as well. I'll fill up the container with mulch, and then by the end of the year, there is no mulch in it, and it's time to, but all that stuff will break down. So the compressing and all that stuff, and so we've got to add soil to it. Now, this is where it gets a little bit hairy. What is your method to amend soil? Well, hold on. Yeah, let's do amending first. We're going to go backwards. So for amending your containers, what do you like to do?
So I like to do something similar to what I do in my raised beds. I'm going to, let's just take plainly put, I got a 20-gallon bag, grow bag. I have a little black, I think it's used for concrete stuff. It's a little black container that's kind of flat and low. I dump the 20 gallons of soil into that container. So that's the soil I grew in last year. I am going to add potentially some new soil, actual soil, right? So it's whatever that's in the container is that container mix, right? I'll add potentially some topsoil, right? I may add garden soil, which again, these are no-nos for containers generally speaking, but I'm only adding a bit of it. I am going to add some compost. Again, this is all adding to this 20-gallon bag worth of soil container mix. I may add some perlite. And depending on my field, I may add some granular fertilizer all to this little black trough, right? And then mix it up. And
per pot. Per pot.
This is right now. It's 20 gallons plus worth of container mix now because I've added these other things.
But you're doing it for each container. You're doing that.
Well, let me get to the other bit of it. So
okay.
I'm loading in so I said May, and I'll tell you the why for the May. So then I reload, shovel in all of that mixture into my 20 gallons. I'm going to have some left over. Remember, because I added more, soil, I added more compost. And other days, I do everything I just described, but I don't add the granular fertilizer because I want to add it when I'm planting because I'm adding it based on what I'm planting.
Right.
Right. So there's no rhyme or reason as to I do it this way all the time under these circumstances. It just depends on what I'm doing. Maybe I only have 2 containers to manage and I'm going to plant them all out today. Because what ends up happening is I'll go through that first version where I'm doing all of the steps and then it'll be 3 weeks later and I'll forget. Wait, did I add fertilizer to this or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's
funny.
That's
my way.
We are totally different in this. So
that's what people tell us.
Yeah, they do. Again, I have bigger pots, so that helps. But I take my shovel, I dig a hole out of the middle, I dump soil in, I put a couple shovelfuls of compost in, and then I put about a quarter handful of fertilizer in, mix it together, walk away. And that's really all I do. And I only do it about once a year. So I do it in the beginning of the year, and then I call it good. Now I take that back. In the fall, I'll redo it again, just a little bit. I might throw another shovel of compost in or something like that. But nothing insane is occurring. So I just try to do it easy. Now, the reason why I asked you if you're doing it in your trough 1 pot at a time is because, if somebody with multiple pots, especially if you have smaller pots that you can pick up, dumping them all into a big pile, making a whole big, just mixing it all up, adding whatever you want into it, and then putting it all back. What do you think about that? I like that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the meme where the most recent version is a lady with a glass of wine and she's sitting in the middle of the floor and there's their clothes, their trinkets, they're just all over the place. And it's like you get in the middle of your reorganization project and you realize you have no more steam. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. I am notorious for that.
Yeah.
Right? I have a good girlfriend. We used to be roommates. She sends me that meme every time she sees it. And I'm like, yep, still me. Right? So I say that to say, I'm conscious of the space I have. I've done that before, and I think it works really well. I'm also conscious of who I am. And so you will start Batavia this on Monday, and that pile of dirt will still be there on Thursday.
Yeah.
Right? So is it the end of the world? No. Does it create a mess? What happens when it rains on Wednesday? So if you're getting in and out, I think that makes absolute sense. That's kind of what I try to do with the trough. I also use like those big storage containers, right? So I want to be able to work up shovel around that soil, and it's a little bit large. I don't know how many gallons, like 40 gallons or something those containers are sometimes. So yeah, I think that way works. I like the idea of working in place like you do. Great. Not necessarily for me. It's again, just kind of the way I'm wired, right? I want to really feel like this is a fresh kind of, bit of soil. And I'm not saying what you're doing doesn't create a fresh bit of soil, but, am I getting down to the bottom and really bringing that soil up to the top? Maybe, maybe not. Is it absolutely necessary? No, but I like it.
Yeah.
So I think we covered 3 different ways there, right?
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of different ways.
A lot of people, just real quick, I'm sorry. A lot of people will use a tarp or something for what you were just describing.
Yeah. You lay a tarp down, dump everything on, mix it up, whatever. I like that. It's just, I'm not going to do it because my pots are too heavy to easily pick up. I get tired
for
of shoveling.
You.
Yeah, for me, because clearly I'm weak and you're way strong.
I tell you that I pulled my back on something. It wasn't 20-gallon pots though.
No, were you spinning lettuce again? Shout out to anybody who heard that episode. No, but it's the important thing to take away is you got to amend your pots. You've got to add soil into it. And this is a big downfall for me for containers. I mean, look, I add soil to my garden every year, but I literally just shovel it on and just walk away, and everything else kind of falls into place. With pots, it's a little bit more complicated because, especially if you're using fertilizer, which is important, you can get excess salts built up inside of your pots. That's a big, especially like I know in the cannabis industry, it's a real issue because they have to, when you're growing cannabis in a pot, you are consistently fertilizing, trying to maximize that growth. So when you do that, you build up the salts in it. And so you've got to either flush them out or replace the soil, one of the two. And so adding the soil to it will I don't want to say neutralize it, but it dilutes it, right? It dilutes that effect. And then a lot of times if you're getting bagged soil, it's probably got fertilizer in it. So you're already feeding it, but it's probably just not going to be enough for what you're doing. Yeah.
So let's take a pause right there. And in my early years of container gardening, I used exclusively bagged soil.
Right.
And, honestly, I have to answer a question about this today. Someone asked kind of, what do you recommend for soil? And I'm not.
Fair.
I've used a few different brands of bagged soil. The reason why I don't exclusively use bagged soil now is simply because of the expense. Right. It's not necessarily an issue with quality, but there are some bagged soils for potting soil that are better than others. And it changes from year to year sometimes. So anywho, if you're using bagged soil, let's just walk that through. You'll have the advertisement on the package that says feeds up to 6 months. Some I've seen more recently feeds up to 9 months. Right. Yep. So if you take that for what it's worth and you do nothing but put that soil into a container, you'd start in April and you're done by fall. Theoretically, when you get to year 2, everything that plant was fed is gone. Like it's been depleted from that soil. Right. And that's, again, it's pick up on my toad here. Like I'm saying, all right, okay, sure, that it doesn't need anything else. 9 months, I can grow in here. I don't necessarily believe that, and I try to make adjustments for that, but let's just pretend. So when you get to year 2, that's why we're talking about amending, right? That stuff that you're growing isn't going to grow in that soil year over year if you started with potting soil and never do anything. Even if you make your own mix, it's not going to feed infinity. Can
I make a comment real quick?
Yeah, of course.
How ridiculous is it that we in this day and age feel like we need to ask what kind of soil are you buying? Like, what are we saying? It's dirt. We're using it's crazy that there's a whole market for bagged dirt and that we are so confused over it. And I'm not saying shame on you for asking. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the principle of it is just crazy. I will say, because soil, bagged dirt is not created equal.
Yeah.
And when I say created equal, I don't mean topsoil versus potting soil versus garden soil. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about brand wise. I mean, I've gotten soil that had trash in it, like legit, Hershey. It was specifically Hershey Kiss wrappers balled up in it. So but again, I paid 50 cents for the bag. I mean, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? I will say this: if you don't know what kind of soil to get, my personal suggestion is look at the dirt. If it looks good, use it. I mean, all the words and stuff on there, it's like, what's the composition of it when you hold it in your hand? If you hold it in your hand, does it look like something that you would want to grow in? Then use it. Because the benefit of the container is it's such a small space that you can add to it. If you start dumping out and you're like, oh, wait, hold on, you could start over. Versus doing a raised bed and I dump a truckload in and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Well, what the hell am I going to do now? I got to shovel it all out. Like, that would be a nightmare. So, use that to your advantage. And I think it's important too, because you can tell what brand soil you use. I might not even be able to find that here. You know what I mean? So maybe a moot point.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a part of me that wants to dive in there and there's a part of me that doesn't.
Oh, it's fine if you don't.
The part that doesn't want to dive in is I don't want to get on a soapbox about paying for dirt and paying for water. Save that for the behind the scenes and the, Backyard Gardens After Dark podcast. I have very strong feelings about both. Not to mention paying for and sometimes a lack of quality in either. So putting that aside, I do believe that the plethora of brands for a number of things that we experience does create the one is better than the other. Tell me what you're doing, right? I get that question. I try not to feel like I'm pressured around the response to that. I have, you said the Hershey's Kisses wrapper. One of the brands that I really like for garden soil, like if I'm topping off a raised bed, one year I opened it up and I was like, what is this? And so I loaded that thing back up and took it back to the store. Like, nope, not in my garden. So anyway, I think that a good example of potting soil, which I'm going to use the term potting soil or potting mix. I'm going to use those terms where if you're going to a store and buying it, that's generally recommended for containers. I have 2 different brands that I've been using over the years, and one that is noticeably fluffier, right? Has less organic matter in it compared to another, right? And again, it's the application. If I'm planting outside, I may, in a 20-gallon container, want a little bit more, maybe a few more wood chips in there, maybe not a whole lot, but a few more. And then if I'm planting in a smaller container, maybe I just want all of the fluff. Maybe I want some vermiculite. Maybe I want some perlite in here. That's what it says in this package. So I think it's trial and error, to be quite frank.
Yeah, and I mean, you learn over time. I mean, the thing is once you build, you put it in there like, cool, I like it. Then you can add to it and you remember it. But it's tough because, one of the reasons why people get the question is because they're like, well, I like your containers. What soil are you using? Yeah. Well, typically speaking, the brand of soil that you got doesn't matter. It's how that's one piece of the puzzle. The fact is you just got to have soil. I mean, we're not growing air plants. Yeah. So there is that aspect. It's easier
for me to say what I don't use. So straight topsoil.
I use that.
Meaning nothing else. Do you put only topsoil in a container?
I top them off with topsoil.
Okay, that's different. Was it originally only topsoil?
No, I'm taking it back. No, they are all. No, well, I'm thinking because now that I have the bigger pots, I had to when I got my garden dirt, it was all topsoil because I rotate every other year, and they're filled up with pure topsoil.
Your container is filled up with pure topsoil. I am shocked by that. And now it makes me question if it's my experience or what I've consistently heard. I have opened a bunch of bags of topsoil. Topsoil is much more dense than, your potting soil by design. And that's why generally it's not recommended, right? Because there's not as much aeration in that dense soil. It doesn't allow to kind of dry. It creates an opportunity to be more waterlogged, but you have been here in his lived experience. So there's that. So for me, I would never add pure topsoil only to a container. I use it as a part of kind of a 3-part mix, some type of soil, some type of like filler. In the case of peat moss is what I have access to. Coco coir is said to be a more sustainable.
How do you say it?
Coco coir?
I'm just going to agree with you. I don't say it out in public because I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. Who are you to basically put me on the spot for it then?
Because I wanted to hear it because I want to know how to say it, but I don't know if you said it right.
And you're not going to bring me down to spelling it. All right. You're picking up on what I'm throwing down, audience. And then compost. That mixture, and there's a video on YouTube, because this is just a big old infomercial, where I do making easy and cheap potting soil mix. It looks like the way I titled it. And it breaks down me making a brand new mixture from scratch. And then it breaks down me amending it from one year to another. And so that's worked for me. Now, also take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to keep it really real. I just told you earlier on, okra and tomatoes just give me the flux every year in containers. Every year I try them. So there's that. But everything else I put in containers, like, I'm killing the game, son.
I haven't thought about putting the okra in a container. I might need to try that.
Yeah, let me know how it turns out.
Well, no, I don't want to because it turned into a damn tree and then it messed me up. Yeah, and I mean, just because I put topsoil. Now, again, the topsoil that I got, I bought it from somebody who made the topsoil, and there was like extra little sticks and stuff in it. So there was that aspect, but it didn't have any compost or anything like that. Now I'll come back this year. I mulched it as well. So that helps add organic matter. And then this year I'll come back and I may put again, I'll put the compost in and stuff like that. But that's what I use. And that was just because that's what was available to me. I'm not hardcore container gardener like you are though. Like, I mean, and I'm not saying you're hardcore, but the numbers don't lie. You know what I mean? I got 6 containers. You got 20, 30, whatever it was. So there is that. But when we go into it, because the compost is a good addition, because we have to get into the feeding aspect of it. And you got to feed containers. And again, if you're buying bagged soil, depending on how much you put in, there is some food in it. But I'm going to argue that you should put more in.
Me too. Well, I think it's preemptive. So in my early years of gardening, period, there was no fertilizing. And it's been my more recent years of gardening, there's been fertilizing across my garden. But where I'm most consistent is with my containers. And it's because I'm watching plants grow throughout the season. I see when they're flourishing and I see when they start to peter out. And it's not necessarily the plant I'm growing doesn't like this time of season. No, that thing's hungry. Yeah. So I start the season with feeding them. And then at some point maybe not every single container, but for the majority of them, I'm coming in place fertilize. Sometimes depending on what it is, it's, something water soluble, sometimes it's something granular. It kind of depends on the mood, depends on what I have in my garage and access to. So I definitely have it took me some time I don't want to say admit this to myself as if it's like some big thing, like, oh my gosh, I've been fighting it. But I'm a fighter. But it's you kind of have to see it for me, myself, to realize, oh, this thing is lacking. And now I can see what happens when I give it what it ultimately needs. So how are you losing, what this container soil bag said you had? You had 9 months. How are you losing time on that? Between the rain and your watering, some of that stuff is quite literally rinsing out.
Yeah, I mean, nitrogen is water soluble. End of story. You can take a whole container with 100% nitrogen in it, somehow, if you could get that, and then you could water it consistently, and it will literally wash out of your garden. So we got to think about that when we do this. You said a good analogy earlier. Spoiler, or not a spoiler, but behind the scenes, we actually started this episode and stopped it. But in the previous version of it, you said this analogy about seeing container gardens on the internet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I want you to say that again, because it's really important and it applies directly to this.
Yeah. God bless you, because my current memory always gets confused. We rarely kind of stop and start, but in the case when we do, I'm like, did we talk about that in the last episode? Or, was it the one that we're doing now? So I feel like my view, and I feel like I take in quite a bit of garden content, and my view of container gardeners and gardens is you either see this flourishing container garden. There's some people that have containers side by side and you look at, they're just like, again, everywhere. And plants are like just spilling out of it. Plant height, plant leaves, width. And then this is the key. And the actual production, if it's a fruiting crop. Like, I need to see that, right? So you see that, it's like, oh my gosh. And then on the other side of it, you see people with puny containers. We look at the soil, it's dry, the plants are skinny, the leaves are yellowing. And the comment I made earlier, and I'll say it again as I'm saying it out loud, I think it could be offensive, but this is just what I believe in my head, and a lot of times it feels like they don't realize, the gardener doesn't realize that this could be better for them. And I say that based on the way they speak about whatever they're sharing or the way they write about it in a caption. And this is the hard bit. I can't jump in every time and say, hey, how about you do this? Because people, if they don't realize they have a problem, sometimes they don't want a potential solution.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like there's, most times it's one extreme or another. There's not a lot of in between.
Yeah. And I think, I said this before, but it's worth noting is I think too that people, when you're growing, you don't realize it because you see it every day. And then when you come and you like see it like fresh eyes, like you can immediately pick it out. And I mean, in that description you gave, you can hear every single thing that we've talked about so far. Yellow leaves, nitrogen deficiency, dried soil, puny, could be watering, could be a mending of the soil, and then obviously the watering aspect of it, or the space. The plant just may not have enough space to grow in it.
It could be stressed because of that. It could be pest pressure, which we didn't touch on, but it could be a number of different things.
Yeah, it could be pest pressure. Kind of goes across the board almost. It's not
specific to containers.
Yeah, it's not really specific to containers. That's just general gardening. So, I mean, and it's nothing against anybody. It's like, look, you don't realize it, you don't realize what you could have, but just take some of these steps and eliminate some of the problems. What's the easiest for you to eliminate in this? As far as the fertilizer goes, I don't want to gloss over it too much. I recommend topping off your soil clearly. Even if it does have fertilizer, I recommend putting in more fertilizer at planting. And then I also recommend coming back if it's a long season crop and fertilizing again at least once or twice more to kind of keep that plant going, because you have to remember those roots have nowhere to search for food, because that's what a root does. A root will come down and it'll look for two things: water and food. And so the gist of it is, if you give it too much water, then you won't have a plant that will dig its roots down deep, and it won't be held into the ground strong. If you give it too little water, it'll go too deep, but then it can desiccate the plant and die. Same thing for food. Those plants are going to search for food. And that's why for the rest of my garden and this, I don't just put fertilizer in the hole anymore. I put it around the whole area so that the plant will send the roots out looking for the roots. And then it gets more roots means more fruits, baby. That's what I got to say. That's the saying for the year. More roots equals more fruits.
Yeah. I haven't heard you say, the idea of, the shallow watering and the shallow roots, shallow watering creating, maybe puny roots in a while. And it's a really good reminder, if you got something that's planted underground, it's hard for you to know how well it's doing underground, right? I mean, nobody's seeing their roots when a plant's actively growing. And so I look at kind of this and I say a good exercise is, we're at the beginning of like almost a new season for the garden. So spring is wrapping up for some of us and heading into summer shortly. If you're pulling full plants out of containers, take a look at that root system. Again, log that information. One of the things I've toyed around with last year, and I know that I talk about collards a lot, and I'm going to keep on talking about them. I did a new variety that was meant to grow a bit more compact. I can't think of the name of it out of the top of my head right now. And they did wonderful. They were in either 7 or 10 gallon grow bags. Wonderful in the spring. About summer, they were on the struggle bus. And I had very close to them collards in a raised bed that were still flourishing. And so I said, I know what Classic Batavia does. Classic Batavia really nurtured those plants because everything else in the garden was pretty small or compact, at that point, in those first couple of months. And then kind of all things happen in the garden, and I started paying less attention to those plants, and they suffered greatly. And so I looked and I said, if I had to do it over again, and I may have mentioned this at the beginning of last season, I just don't remember, sometimes things run their course. So getting harvest off of those plants in the spring may have been enough for me, right? So I know I pushed the envelope when it comes to growing some brassicas and leafy greens well into the heat of our season, but I couldn't keep up with it. Right. I couldn't manage the pest pressure for it. Because I was trying to keep them covered. I couldn't manage the watering. I probably didn't do a good job with the fertilizing. And there's something to be argued. And I still haven't pulled the roots out for these plants. But let me put an alarm for my phone, a calendar reminder. I'm curious how big the roots are when I pull those plants out this year. Yeah. They're still in the garden, in the grow bags from last year. I'm wondering how little soil is left. They probably topped out from that perspective as well, right? So I say all of that to say some things you plant don't need to stay in that container, all of its possible kind of start to finish time frame. Yeah. It's okay to pull a thing, refresh, amend that soil, and plant something anew, right?
Yeah. So, and I mean, one thing, the honorable mention would be having a good plan for your garden, your container garden, as far as like positioning and stuff like that. The benefit is you can move containers around, which is why we always recommend using the Planter app. They actually have in their drag and drop square foot interface, they have a container outline that you can put in so you can visually see that this will be a container. So if you've been on to my YouTube channel and you saw me do my gardening plan, which I'm going to do another one soon, probably for fall coming up, you'll see that I have up against my greenhouse all the containers lined up, and it just is easy to recognize that. So definitely check that app out. There is a link below that will give you a discount on the Planter app, on all subscriptions to it, all memberships. It's a very useful app, combative, companion planting, visual, very visual. They're always adding new varieties and vegetables and a lot of flowers now, if that's something you're into. So check that out. It's the Planter app, and it's available on Google and Apple, and you can use it on your phone, tablet, or PC. And that's the reason why we love them as a sponsors, because it is a very good app that we live by on the show. So that being said, that brings us to the time of the show where we need to do the question of the day. And I have an interesting one. We're just going to run with it. So this one comes from the Backyard Gardens Community Garden. And Christina wants to know, what do we think about those fancy countertop composters that magically turn everything from celery butts to chicken bones into perfect soily compost? I don't believe them, but I am intrigued.
Hey, Christina. Did you feel that death stare? I was like, you better stop when you finish.
I stopped.
I concur. Like I always wonder, how much does it produce? And then I challenge myself and say, does it matter how much? Isn't any enough? I also am challenged with I don't want the mess. So I don't know if I have a real opinion on them. It feels like, even beyond the advertisements, like people are pretty happy with them when I see them talk about them.
Well, let me say this. First of all, it's not about how much they produce. It's about how much you produce. So that's the questions. How much scraps are you making and how much is it? So do I doubt that it's going to make them? No, I don't doubt that it's going to make it. But I just did a Google search for countertop composters. And for $300, I will never find out what they produce. I'm seeing them for anywhere from $50 to $400. Most of them around the $200 to $300 range. The thing for me is the amount of compost that it can hold is just not worth doing for me. You need a lot more compost than that. It seems kind of like a gimmick if you ask me personally. Now, if you live in a big city and you don't have anywhere, I think it's a good thing to do. Cut down on waste, whatever, and you have a container garden. Look, this falls right into the show. You have a container garden on your back porch, then yeah, maybe you can just start another bucket and kind of keep it on hand. But I don't really put a lot of stock into them. I just don't think it's worth it.
So the part about, how much, I felt like we said the same thing, like how much can it make? How much can it produce? Like based on the size. That's what I was talking about. What do you think about composting inside of your garden? Have you seen like when people dig a hole and dump stuff in right there?
Oh yeah, I've done that. I mean, yeah, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. For me in my area, it attracts pests. So I try, that's why I have a separate pile completely. And the thing is my pile cost me $0. So there is that aspect of it. I just, it's going to do what it needs to do. It's going to rotate the pile for you, probably turns it into a heck of a lot faster than I can do it, because it's going to turn it automatically for you. It's going to, do everything it needs to do. But I'm with Batavia too. I just don't want to do that into my house. We already have a bucket for composting, which, it gets questionable at times if we don't empty it enough. But otherwise, like, I'm not interested. So, it's a good, I don't know, man. It was a good idea. Let me put it that way. But again, it's just not for the gardener.
I get it. And I think there could be some level of fun to it. Like, look at what this thing produces. Maybe it's a entryway into composting.
For somebody who doesn't like to compost?
If someone would let me finish a thought, right? Where you are on this podcast trying to embarrass me. Not an entryway for me. I know me well enough to know, like, it's not something I would keep up with. I don't think I would. I don't know. Maybe if one of my good girlfriends listening and they're trying to figure out what to get me in the, for my birthday. I don't know, $300 though. That's freaking steep, man.
Buy me a $300 composter. I wouldn't even want anyone to
spend $300 on that for me.
Well, and the thing is, though, I think, I had a thought and I lost it. What did you say? You said that it's not for you. You wouldn't use it.
Well,
that's
I
the
think
thing is it gets
the consistency.
Yeah, the consistency of using it. So, like when we first started composting, and even today, like I'll open the trash can. I'll be like, "Why'd you throw the coffee grounds away?" Oh, well, I didn't think about it. I'm like, "How you gotta think about it? We've been composting for like 15 years at this point." Like. But I mean, it's a habit that you get into as far as like composting your materials and stuff like that. So you would get into the habit of it eventually, or you just throw it away. For me, when I throw mine away, if I decided to quit, it would be throwing away a plastic bucket, not a $15. We've been reusing this, or $300. We've been reusing the same plastic bucket for like 5 years now. So I think we've gotten our mileage out of it. But if anybody else is using them and they like them, let us know. But I just don't think it can produce the amount of compost that one would need for the garden. And then you have to worry about storing it and all that other stuff. So I'm not overly concerned about it.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you want to be like Christina and leave us a question, we urge you to use our email address, bygquestion. No S at the end because somebody already has that, whatever, at gmail.com. Or you can do it on our Facebook page or wherever else you do. Just make sure you label it question of the day. And if we don't get to it, it's because we just couldn't keep track of it, but we do our best. And we'd love to get your questions and answer them on the air. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by ordering some seeds, using the discount code, get yourself a free pack of seeds and 10% off. You can become a subscriber and get our extra monthly episode, or you can get the Planter app and show them some support. We do not get a commission off of it, but we are happy for them to continue to grow. So on that note, everybody, remember this. We're going to learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at patreon.com/backyardgardens, or you can be an Apple subscriber, and in both of those, you'll get an extra episode every month. You can also make a one-time PayPal donation with the link below, and you can get all kinds of gardening gear like t-shirts and mugs and cups from the link below at Teespring, and we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.